WWE WrestleMania 37 Tampa, WWE back in business, Raymond James Stadium, and I've got the legendary media of professional wrestling sports entertainment right here, getting ready for night 2 of WrestleMania 37.
I'm Jay Reddick with the Orlando Sentinel.
Scott Fishman for TV Insider, Wrestling Inc., etc.
A lot of things. And I'm Jon Alba with the Living the Gimmick podcast.
Yes! So we've got tremendous fans, action, and media here at WrestleMania. So, first off, guys, just what do you think? And I'll start with Jay. What do you think of WWE back in business?
I tell you, all you have to do is listen to the crowd last night especially, and fans here were obviously rabid for anything to cheer for, and the fact that the company delivered last night on a pretty good show certainly helped a lot. So I'm excited for it, and obviously the fans are too.
First time with fans, huge event, 25,000. That's their limit, sold out. What did you think, Scott?
Well, I had goosebumps when I opened, when you can hear just the roar of the crowd, just having that energy. You don't realize, how much you missed something until you didn't have it for more than a year. So I think just the fact, that simple, just having that extra energy there, I think you saw a lot. That helped the matches. I think that elevated a lot of the matches, and even kicking it off with Drew and Bobby, you could see how much having the fans there really helped their presentation. So, and that whole emotional moment with Vince McMahon with the superstars behind him, I just thought that was the perfect way to start the show.
John, what did it mean to you here, Central Florida, Tampa, having it here? You do a lot of coverage of all sports, news, everything. What did you think of having WrestleMania here and how it went down after last year and not having it here? It had to move to Orlando.
Yeah, I think the crazy thing about it all has been that it was back on April 9th of 2020 that Florida Governor Ron DeSantis signed the executive order that allowed WWE and other similar combat sports and entertainment entities to run in Florida. It was the next day after that Vince McMahon made the decision to go live in Orlando from the PC on a weekly basis. So for that to come full circle almost a year to the day later is pretty remarkable. And I think that the scene that we saw on Saturday night was one of, okay, we're not quite back to normal yet, but we're getting there. And I think that's a good thing.
And I'm just going to pan out a little bit here because I don't care. I'll say it. I took photos with this backdrop. It was so cool. WWE, their production value, the set of what they do is just so amazing. And you see the very cool pirate ship. We're here, home of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers Super Bowl champs, Raymond James Stadium. Jay, what do you think? Production value, set, just all the ancillary that went on here for this.
I tell you, I was impressed looking around at the cardboard cutouts that are providing spacing in the stands, because sort of like the Super Bowl was, once the crowd gets in, it's kind of hard not to see it as a sellout crowd. You had to sort of squint and look pretty hard not to, to figure out who was real and who was cardboard. But beyond that, just the set design and everything that they always do, it like you said, it's always top notch.
Scott, what did you think too? The pyro, WWE always goes big, especially for WrestleMania.
Yeah, and just to piggyback off what Jay said, actually, when I asked the WWE rep if, if there's any symbolism or any meaning, like with other sports, like you could pay a certain amount and have your face put on the chairs, but I was told that they're just generic cutouts. So maybe somewhere down the line they might revisit that, but I think I agree. I mean, just the presentation of it, just seeing it on, especially when we're being here live, but then you go home and you see it on TV and you see the videos and you just see it's amazing, how far we've come in the past year, and they were able to pull it off, especially with the weather. I think the unsung heroes, as I said in a tweet last night, were just the crew that had to, take the tarp off, clean the ring, make sure it was safe for the performers to appear. So, and just rolling with the punches. We had an almost half-hour weather delay, and they didn't miss a beat, so everything kind of went off and had a successful first night. So I think that in itself just shows you how WWE works as this well-oiled machine.
Yeah, and some of those cardboard cutouts became impromptu umbrellas for people too. So that ended up working out as well.
And it's interesting because you had this going on, and Scott mentioned the delay. John. And during the delay, it was Sarah and Kevin were doing interviews backstage with the superstars. Just what were your thoughts of all of a sudden we're ready to go, and then boom, bombshell. Wait, we got a rain delay after all that time.
I actually think it brought to light an interesting dynamic, right? Where I think we're so used to WWE programming being very scripted and very much more tight in nature as opposed to other promotions, where they were thrown in a situation where people had to have their feet to the fire and, okay, come up to the top of your head, what do you got for us? And I thought that was a really big test for a lot of the talent, and I thought most of them really succeeded in that sense. It also made me wonder, in the future, do you have contingency plans for something like this? Do you film matches at the WWE Performance Center and have those ready to go? Do you re-air a match from NXT TakeOver or whatever you may do in order to fill that time?
Jay, how did you feel about when you saw the superstars coming out at the beginning of the show, lining up under the pirate ship on the rampway, and the CEO, Chairman Vince McMahon, makes his welcome and thank you fans speech in that moment?
Oh, well, you and I were sitting next to each other when it happened, and it was totally a chill bump moment. And I didn't necessarily think of it as what would start the show, but once they came out there, I'm like, this is the only way that they could have possibly started the show.
And Scott, also for you, what did it mean when you saw that moment and hearing the fans just going crazy at that time?
Yeah, I mean, I had to stand myself, but I mean, before all this started, I was like the one person that needed to open the show was Drew McIntyre, just because he was this guiding light, this reliable soldier through the whole pandemic era of WWE and how everything was being shot, and just him every week, he did every interview opportunity. He was working nonstop. He even kidded around a lot. And he was working more, harder at home than he was, when he was on regular circumstances. So, but the way they decided to have Vince McMahon do it, and his the booming voice, and very reminiscent of WrestleMania 3, where he introduced everyone to WrestleMania. When he panned to Aretha Franklin, that brought me back too. So, and it just kind of gives you a reminder just how important wrestling and WrestleMania is for a lot of people. I mean, before all this, before the event even started, I saw Lana had tweeted a video of just she had been by a gate where all the fans were, and then they all looked at her and they were chanting her name, and just that really got her very emotional. And I saw, you saw Rhea Ripley. She was one of the people that were standing behind Vince McMahon, and you could see how emotional she got. So, because seeing all that, I mean, everyone just feeling that emotion and just marking this milestone, like no matter what, that alone is a historic moment for WrestleMania.
And John, you've interviewed many talent as well, and just to see that moment last night, what did it mean to you just to have it back, and that moment there with Vince McMahon and the superstars? So almost like thank you fans, and fans thank youing them as well for continuing the fight even though it was on TV.
Yeah, well, I've covered a lot of sporting events outside of pro wrestling, major sporting events, NBA playoffs, NFL playoffs, where these just wild, massive things happen. And there are a few moments that came close to what happened on Saturday night here. I thought it was a really nice way to do things, and as Scott said, it kind of encompassed what this whole thing is about, hearing Vince McMahon yell WrestleMania, and where as the first time he did that back in 1987, no one shouted it back, but when he teed them up, it was like a slow-pitch softball, and the whole crowd just knocked it out. So it is the first time that we have collectively gathered here and done something like this.
Well, final question for you all. Thank you so much for doing this as well. Most memorable moments. I know, Scott, you mentioned about Drew McIntyre and Bobby Lashley with MVP, Miami's own MVP, opened the show. What was it like for you? What were some of the memorable moments for you last night?
I think Bad Bunny and his performance. I mean, we heard that he was putting in the work and that his performance was going to surprise a lot of people. But when you're on this big stage, you often forget. You're not just having a regular wrestling match on Monday Night Raw. You're having it on WrestleMania, the biggest platform that you can on a professional wrestling beat. I mean, he's performed at the Super Bowl, he's been at the Grammys, but this is a whole different animal, and the fans are a whole different animal and a dynamic in itself. And if you go by social media, you're like, this guy's going to get booed out of the building. But he got one of the biggest reactions of the night, and he really fed off the crowd. And beyond the big moves that he had, just the way he worked in the ring. I mean, he wasn't just there a couple of spots. He was, he was working. He was in there the majority of the time. And his timing with Damian Priest, I think, and who got elevated. And kudos also to The Miz and John Morrison for also helping put that match together and making it really memorable. So I think he opened a lot of eyes last night. And then beyond that, Bianca Belair and Sasha Banks, I think a lot of us, all of us will probably agree about just how special that moment was, just for the women's division, but also, two women of color. But just the fact that they have earned that spot, they deserve that. They deserve to be there, and they kind of owned it. They owned the stage, and that big moment with Bianca winning the women's championship, and just confirming how good of a performer Sasha Banks is. So I think those two kind of really stand out to me.
And it was interesting. I like the way they did Bad Bunny on that huge rig, driving up on his intro. There's always a production value. I was telling Jay last night, and the camera angles and things like that, it's just always mesmerizing to me, just some of the great shots and some of the things they think up and do. So Jay, what about you for last night?
Well, Scott stole one of my big ones, which was just the emotion of Bianca and Sasha both. Before the match, during the match, after the match, just was really touching to see, and it felt really real, and I'm sure it was incredibly real to them. The work of that match and the layout of that match completely was a big highlight. The emotion of it was great. I also really got into Cesaro and the emotion.
Great moment.
Yes, exactly. The emotion of his win, and just the fact that it was hard to hide the fact that he felt like a kid in a candy store out there. Just so happy to be in a spot where you could really shine, and that really struck me. So that's another one.
Yeah.
And John, how about for you?
Yeah, one thing I was really looking forward to seeing was the litmus test of Bobby Lashley, and seeing would he rise to the moment, because he, outside of WrestleMania 23, how would he be received? Because the last time fans were in the audience for Bobby Lashley, he was with Lana and a wedding cake. And now he had to be taken seriously as a main eventer. And I thought he passed with flying colors in that sense. The most memorable moment for me was Bianca Belair winning the championship. You have to put into perspective, WWE, and not just WWE, but pro wrestling as a whole, has really struggled with racial stereotypes over the years. Pro wrestling has been really bad with racial stereotyping as a trope. We've seen it as a company especially progress significantly in that. To have two women of color in the main event put on the caliber of a match that they did, in combination with Bobby Lashley, a person of color, winning the championship in the opening match, so bookending that, I don't think it can be understated how important that is in pro wrestling history. And really what we saw on Saturday night is something that should be talked about for many years to come.
Socially as well,
For sure.
as you say. That's so interesting. And I know Jay and I were talking last night, and I'll steal this from Jay, but it really was his, about Damian Priest and just how far he's come. And we don't have to mention his age, you can look it up, but he's been around a while, and just doing what I didn't realize that until Jay brought it up to me, and I was like, wow, yeah, this is a cool moment for Damian after all those years of getting that. And the other thing that struck me, which you guys were talking about, was Bianca getting emotional right before the match. The match was starting, she's getting emotional, and instead of like, as fans, you're like, why is she crying? No, you know why she's crying. You know why she's gotten so emotional, and you're into it. You're like, okay, and then once that was over, it was all right, now let's get down to business. So those were some cool moments, of the moments that you guys are all talking about.
Yeah, no, and I mentioned this to you with Priest, and I also tweeted about it. I think that Bad Bunny worked the first however many minutes of that match, and the moment that Priest tagged in,
They went nuts.
was one of the biggest crowd pops of the night. And I don't care, Damian Priest has not had his giant WWE moment. He's worked in other companies, he's had success, but he's going to remember that moment for the rest of his life.
Well, it was just an awesome night one, and I'm going to say right now, guys, awesome that you guys are here doing this. I appreciate this so much. Three of the best. Check out their work. Jay, do you want to give any where you could be found, any information?
Sure, you can find my writing at orlandosentinel.com/pro wrestling. And you can also follow me on Twitter at RunninJ. That's RunninJay.
Is that like Running Man, the Arnold Schwarzenegger movie?
Yes.
Is something like that?
Yes, and it's a long story why the G's not there. But yes.
We'll get in that another time, Jay.
Right.
Scott?
Yeah, I'm at SM Fishman on Twitter. You can also do a search on my Facebook page, as well. You can do a search on ProWrestlingInc.com or TVInsider.com. Occasionally on Pro Wrestling Illustrated, so a little of everything.
Scott, a man of many hats these
I'm a
days.
journeyman. Whoever wants to pay me, I'm there for you.
Yes!
Casually flunking with PWI. And you can find me on Twitter at Jon Alba, JONALBA. Lose the H's are for losers. And you can check out the Living the Gimmick podcast, dropping every Tuesday wherever you get your podcasts. So.
Well, WrestleMania, thank you guys so much!